Hi, welcome to the Small Shed. This Saturday we're back in the garden finding more work to do. I'll see you in a minute. Now as spring has started to bring a few better days with it, it's time to actually go out and start and do a bit of work in the garden and wake that up again. It's looking a bit sorry for itself after the winter. One of the problems I've got is that I'm having to do more work in the garden now because my wife's hip replacement has meant she's not quite as easily able to get down and bend down and dig and that sort of thing, so I'm helping out a bit with that. And while I'm doing it, obviously looking around, you're sort of a bit more mindless than doing anything like woodworking, and you start and pick up all the things that also need doing. So there's a few jobs that I'm picking up that'll need doing in the future. Let's go out and have a look and see what we've been up to, just to try and brighten the place up a bit anyway. So the first thing I did was to get a decent cut on the lawn, which hadn't been cut for, well, probably 6 months or more. Been a bit disappointed with the lawn because I spent an awful lot of time and effort when I put the brick circle round it, in digging it over, putting compost in it, putting drainage grit and all sorts in it, double digging it all, and it hasn't really taken very well at any time. So I'm having a bit of a go this year to see if I can't get it a little bit better. A mixture of feeding it and getting some more drainage going into it. So I've started off with a fork, literally going from top to bottom every few inches, digging the fork in, just waggling it around, lifting it a bit, getting a little bit of air down into the lower levels, and then I'll put some grit and compost in to get that little bit more mixed in. Hopefully the worms will come and do their job then and help it along, because it really hasn't. The problem is, although it doesn't get much walking on it, it gets walked on in a straight long line along where the prop is, the line for the washing, and it's, you can see there's almost a light patch down the middle where it just isn't growing very well. So I've got some compost, mixed it up with some grit. It's a very coarse sand, probably about 50-50 as a mix. And then I'm just going to throw that over the whole lot. The whole level could do with coming up a little bit anyway, so I'm not too worried about putting stuff on top as a top dressing. It probably could do with half a ton or so of it on it just to get it up. Probably it only wants about half of an inch or an inch, 15-20 mil, something like that, just to get it slightly up to the level of the stones around the edges. But this will have to do for the moment, just getting it roughly spread out around the holes that we've knocked out with the fork, and then just brushing the mix in. Once there's an area of the stuff done, I'm just brushing it in, and after it's brushed in roughly, the rain and watering will do the rest, I'm sure, over the next couple of days. I've just raked it to get some of the dead grass out as well. That will help just to aerate the top surface a bit anyway and give it a chance. Just breaks up the top layer of soil slightly as well, and make it ready so I could put some fertiliser down on top of that. This was done over a couple of days, it wasn't all done in one day, but you can see this is back in March, I think, when we've got some decent weather. Fortunately we'd got a few nice days which gave us a chance to get the early start on the garden. Next in with the fertiliser. Doesn't look quite such a good day then, but you have to leave it 2 or 3 days after a cut before you can put the fertiliser on. and fortunately for me it wanted to rain within the day or two after, and as you can see there, it's just starting to rain as I was just finishing off that, so gave it a chance to get some watering in on that, and that hopefully will see the lawn pick up a bit. It'll be a long job, I'm sure, and it will need some more fertilising later on. Looking at jobs for the future, the leak that I had on the little bit of the shed on the front for the tools, that needs sorting out. I've got a tap manifold that, like a fool, I didn't let the water out of before the winter. That's frozen and water is now coming out the back where it's split. I did try to repair that, but that was definitely a big fail video, so I've gone out and got a new one. The area where the birds are is a bit of a nuisance at the moment. There's too much stuff getting onto the garden, and the birds that are feeding on that, but it's mainly pigeons and squirrels that are there, so that's a problem. The pond is a real mess with blanket weed and other pond weed. That needs sorting out, and the top one. The rockery is all overgrown with not clematis, cyclamen, and really all the top wanted digging over as well, so we had a couple of days, my wife and I, just hands and knees jobs, just digging out round all the plants that are there to give it a chance. Patio this year probably needs lifting and relaying, but I could do with some decent weather to do that. It's a little bit out of shape, and there's, believe it or not, there's a small water fountain in amongst that lot there, with the cobbles and that wants cleaning out, getting the electrics back commissioned and getting that sorted again. And at where the border is at the back, there's been that much soil put in over the years that it really needs a bit of a retaining wall putting in just to tidy that up. So as I say, there was a failed video that didn't go out of me trying to mend the other manifold, but the water pressure was such that it was just blowing it apart whatever I did with it. So I've got a new one for £5 or £6. It wasn't a huge expense, but it did hurt a bit not being able to mend something. That was popped on and has now got us back up. The reason we have the manifold there is for if we go away on holiday, like we will be this year for a fortnight, I can put a couple of different timers on, so that we can just put a 5 minutes or a minute or 2 minutes or whatever on in the greenhouse every day, and have one once every 3 or 4 days over the garden as well if it needs it. And so after a couple of days we got a few trugs full of dead debris, which has made a lot of difference. The garden doesn't look a lot different at this stage, but it's at least now clear of weeds. We've got some more soil improver down in amongst all the gaps, and it gives it a chance. I've got some of the blanket weed out of the pond. The lawn is starting to pick up a bit, but not a great deal. I've tidied up the bird feeder area, and obviously I still have got to deal with the top patio. There's some work on the hedgehog house in the back corner that needs a rebuild, and the top area, last panel of fencing, needs remaking because that's suffered in the winds. Principally now the biggest job is this cyclamen on the rockery though, that needs digging out, and that's something I had a couple of days just digging away at. Because it's in the rockery, there's not a lot, you can't get in with a big fork, it's more or less all kneeling down with a hand fork. And this is where my wife has been suffering with not being able to do stuff so well, in that we understand that if you kneel like that and then lean back with a artificial hip, it can pop the joint if you're not careful. So I'm trying to get as much of that sort of work done as I can, so that we don't have a problem. And so there we are now, what, 2-3 weeks on, and it's starting to fill out nicely now. The stuff around the small shed, the stuff that's growing up it, and out the front is all filling out nicely. Lawn's starting to look a bit better. The borders are starting to fill out now, and all that work that we did earlier is paying off. The pond is looking a lot better. It's still not perfect. There's still some blanket weed in there I need to deal with, but that's something that I think we can deal with. I think you get bales of straw or something, small bundles of it in there. But at least the garden is looking a lot better and worthy of the effort that we had to put into it, probably, as I say, 2 or 3 weeks earlier. But it's now starting to come back. We've sorted the rockery out, sorted the top pond out. The biggest problem I've got now is this tree, which drops, it's like snow at the moment everywhere, but worse than that, I've had more trouble with hay fever this year than I've ever had. It's been almost like asthma some days. You can just walk out there and within a couple of minutes I'm out of breath. So, but we can't do much about that. We just have to wait for some good weather now and get on with the other jobs that need doing. So that's the start of wrapping up the garden. It's highlighted a load of things I've got to do, but they'll come up as future projects. There's some fencing to repair. I'll probably remake the hedgehog house. We're still unsure as to whether or not we've got one back or not, but on the basis that if I provide a hedgehog house, we might get one even if we haven't got one at the moment. And there's a small retaining wall to build, and it just goes on. The patio to relay, top fountain to do, and wiring, all sorts of things. So plenty of projects to be going on with over the next year, I would think, anyway, out there. Hope it was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next week when we'll be trying to do something different, and I'll see you then. Bye.